about the elements of the project and have Dennis Jackson, who's going to be our lead project manager, get into more detail regarding phases 1 and 2. But let's take a moment and talk about the project objective. And this slide very succinctly states what that objective is. And I'd like you to walk away with 2 thoughts regarding this, and we've put in bold type the most important elements of this. And it talks about efficiencies and effectiveness and self-sustaining. What we're really looking at here, and I really do applaud the City of Goodyear for taking this view. So often communities advance right to the rate study. And in essence, what they're doing is answering the question, how much more revenue do we need? But what we're seeing time and time again is, let's ask another question first. Are we operating as efficiently as we should? Are we organized in the most efficient manner to provide service to our customers? And as Sean said, having completed that phase, then we're able to answer the question, well, do our costs, now that we're an efficient organization, do those now match our revenue stream? And if they don't, then we can move ahead and ask the question, do we need more revenues? So for that reason, Sean has structured this project into a 3-phased approach. Those phases are listed here. Very difficult to read the flow chart. That should be, a copy of that should be in your communication from Sean. So we're going to start off trying to gain a better understanding in phase 1 of the department. What's your business organization? What's your business mission? And after having assessed that through a series of very detailed interviews, and we'll talk more in a moment about that, we're then going to move on to phase 2, assessing your current operational performance. And then as Sean said, only after completing those 2 phases will we then do any comparison of costs to current revenues. And if deemed appropriate, after we bring this back to the council, we'll then move on to phase 3, to really talking about a rate study and the potential realignment or restructuring of the rates that your customers pay for water and sewer service. So with that, let me ask Dennis Jackson to come up and talk a little bit about phases 1 and 2, and then I'll be back in just a moment to talk about that 3rd phase, if in fact we get to it.
Good evening, members of council and Vice Mayor. My name is Dennis Jackson. As Rick mentioned, I'll be the project manager for this project, and I'll be involved throughout all 3 phases, so a consistent point of contact for Sean and the city. I'm a registered professional engineer, and I'm also trained as a financial analyst. The way I like to think about these 3 phases is that the first phase is really about management of the department and the way the department sees itself integrating with other departments. Phase 2 as technical. This will be a technical assessment at the ground level done by engineers and operations experts. And phase 3, I'll turn it back over to Rick to describe phase 3 as financial. So in phase 1, we're really working with the project management team to get their direction and buy-in about the department and the success factors it sees for sort of setting the course for its future. It includes 15 interviews with senior department staff, as well as with directors from other departments like IT, HR, Finance, Public Works, and others, to make sure that they are working together the way they should be. This kind of early engagement of leadership at all levels is really essential for us in setting that course to make sure that the project outcome is what we want it to be. So in phase 2, again, thinking technical, we're assessing operational performance. We'll look at the way the department is operating within its divisions at the division level, treatment plants, collection, distribution, all of the technical functions of the department. And Sean has asked us very specifically to come back with recommendations that provide a bottom line financial assessment. What is the conversion of our technical recommendations in terms of a cost per gallon metric or some other financial metric, so that he can evaluate, are we operating, as Rick said, as effectively and efficiently as possible? Should he be making changes within the department before we go ahead and do a revenue or rate study? In essence, this lays out a roadmap for all kinds of improvements that the department might want to consider. and it answers the question, are we operating as efficiently as possible? So I'll turn it back to Rick to sort of describe the financial piece, or the third piece of this process.
Thank you, Dennis. We have built into this project a purposeful stop, and that is a stop after we complete phases 1 and 2. And in phase 3, we prepare initial long-range financial plan. And this initial plan would look at existing revenue sources that we have without any increase or change, and compare those revenue sources to the cost that Dennis referred to that results from phases 1 and 2, the conversion of the assessment of the department's operations into best practices and into metrics such as cost per 1,000 gallons. And then comparing the two, take this time out, and during that time out, what we would be doing in phase 2 at this stage is to look at what we've termed the cost of service. And this would look at, as Dennis referred to, the cost that the department incurs in support of other city services, and the cost other city services incur, or the other city departments, in support of the Water Resources Department. It would address such things, as Sean referred to, as replacement cost. Goodyear is a relatively new community, but the error here would be to assume that we're always going to be a new community. And we know the primary driver in utility operations is infrastructure capital. And this capital, under the best of installation and operating conditions, will wear out. And we need to be prepared financially to replace those pieces of infrastructure. We'll look at not just level of contingencies, but virtually all of the financial policies that relate to the Water Resources Department, whether it's unrestricted contingencies, whether it's things like debt service coverage and other reserves that we might establish for a variety of reasons. We might be looking at reserves to deal with drought contingencies and the like, and also incorporating into this plan future conservation efforts. Is it fair to say that today the gallons of water used per account will be the same as it will be in the future, given other conservation efforts that are being undertaken in this community? So we'll complete this assessment, and then at that particular point in time, we will come back to council with those results. And at the two extremes, they could show us that the current revenue stream is adequate to support an efficiently organized and operating department. In the alternative, it may show us that there are increases that would be needed to get this department to a point of being self-sufficient. Self-sufficient in terms of meeting all the metrics we establish for reserves, to ensure that we're a financially credible operation, to minimize or completely mitigate any funds or subsidies from the general fund that go to support this operation. That's what self-sufficiency is all about. If we find that there are revenue increases that are needed to meet the requirements of the Water and Sewer Enterprise Funds, we will then move forward through the balance of Phase 3 to prepare this to conduct citizen and stakeholder workshops. At this stage, if we're going to be looking at any sort of realignment or restructuring of the rates that would be driven by changes in policies, it makes a tremendous amount of sense to engage the public and engage your existing citizen process as part of this. We would incorporate feedback from these committees in the development of alternative rate structures and alternative financial plans that would ultimately be brought back to City Council. So it is likely that if we receive your direction to proceed, that we're receiving that direction because even under an efficiently operated form of organization, there's still the disconnect between the amount of revenue you're getting under your current rates and fees and the cost to provide safe, reliable service to the community. So based on the feedback, as I mentioned, we would come back with a proposed financial plan as well as alternative rates that would be designed to accomplish a number of objectives. They may have to deal with affordability, with conservation, with revenue stability. And through the process that we are proposing, working with the Citizen Committee, we would identify those objectives that are most important to the community and then design a plan that is tailored to meet those objectives. This is our project schedule. As Sean mentioned, it is an approximate 12-month schedule. but we would anticipate somewhere along months 6 and 7 being back before council with the results of phases 1 and 2, as well as our preliminary financial plan, where we would talk about the adequacy of the existing revenue stream. So we fully expect to have this project wrapped up this calendar year and be back sometime in the mid to late summer to visit with council about the results of phases 1 and 2. At the end of the day, truly, what is the value in undertaking this kind of study? Well, as I started my discussion, it's really not to go right to the question of how much money do we need. It's to address, first and foremost, concerns or put to the side any questions about our ability to provide safe and reliable service in the most efficient and effective manner, because that's really the mission statement of the Water Resources Department. And we need to complete that assessment first before we come back to our citizens, to our ratepayers, and ask for more money, to put it quite bluntly. Let's be sure that we can look internal, face the mirror inward, and answer the question that we are organized in the most efficient fashion. And throughout this process, to engage internal stakeholders, be they managers within the department, but also managers across a variety of department organizations, and to also engage the citizens, so that we can hear from them if we're going to advance to the stage of changing the rate structure and asking for more money via that change. We want the input of those who are going to have to ultimately foot the bill for that, to ensure that we're a self-sustaining, financially credible water and wastewater enterprise fund. So with that, Vice Mayor and Council, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have about this proposed project.
Yeah, Councilwoman Holland.
Hey, thank you very much. I just want to say how much I appreciate, Sean, that this is a bold step. I know we have the management assessment going on at the same time, but I think this is really a bold step for the Water Department. We've kind of limped along there for years, and now we're pulling out and we're doing the right things, and this assessment is going to give us that information that we need. I know we talked rate changes before, and that's always a very sensitive subject. I see that you had the little stop with the stop sign up there on the paperwork, and so it's going to be interesting to see how this falls out, because we hear a lot of different comments from our citizens about rates and how much they're paying. So it's going to be extremely sensitive, and we're trying to be tuned into that. So. Thank you.
Councilwoman Lloyd, did you have?
No, he asked me for me.
Can you go back to that project, the project schedule slide that you've got there?
Yes.
Those meetings, are those committee meetings, or those meetings with you and staff? Those benchmarks?
It is a mixture.
Okay.
All those blue stars that you see there as meetings are a mixture of staff and consultant meetings, as well as citizen meetings, and then ultimately, as I said, somewhere around meeting month 6 or 7, coming back to council for a briefing.
What's envisioned in those citizen meetings? Is that sorry, I'm going to ask a brainless question here because it's not coming to mind. Is that a standing committee that we've got already, or is that envisioned as a citizens open house?
Vice Mayor, Councilmember Antoniak, we had a citizens committee for the previous study.
Right.
We have been out soliciting those members to kind of in anticipation of this project.
Okay.
And we're getting feedback from them who would like to be interested. We're using some of the members from the not the CAS study, the CAG group from the Superfund site. We've got some resources that we're trying to pull together and not create a new committee, but be able to have people ready that want to have these types of discussions.
Okay.
But today I can't tell you exactly who those people,
I would encourage you to solicit our feedback on that
we
process.
would.
Okay.
We absolutely would.
All right. I wanted to, as I was sitting here listening to this and learning it, and it's been a year or two that or about a year since we last done it. And to contradict my fellow friend in the audience who doesn't think I have ears over here, no, it's not to get the answer I want. It's to have a very viable process. Sorry, Gary. I was overhearing the sidebar.
He has to admit that he's too young
forget.
So,
And I think it's
no,
important.
I thought but I just wasn't sure if we had regen this group, or if we had re-engaged this group, and if we were going to. It wasn't clear in the COAC, and it came as a bit of surprise this evening. But I think it is very important to walk out of here that we're not talking about a rate study at this point. We're talking strictly as a cost of service. And if we get into the rate impacts and the rate study in the future, then that's fine.
And I think it's important, if we need to make a rate adjustment, someday we will. I mean, as you continue to grow as a utility, costs go up. So at some point, you're going to need to, I think it's important that we have identified all the efficiencies that we possibly can find and implement those efficiencies, whether it's through the management assessment that's ongoing now. The management assessment, we look at it as a little more broad-based, as city as a whole, where we think of this cost of service study where it actually drills down where the rubber hits the road, cost of chemicals, cost of producing water, cost of treating wastewater, and being as efficient as we can, because if there's savings there that can delay future rate increases, we want to implement those immediately.
Yeah, I mean, and the broader-based conversation that we have, the broader discussion we have, in terms of public dialogue, the better understanding we have of what it actually costs for the system that the people don't see, that they drive over, walk over, and turn on every single day of their lives. And so the citizen process is definitely an integral part of that.
We agree wholeheartedly in there.
The sooner the better, in terms of don't delay your process, but get them engaged early on, because it definitely is a big learning curve, especially as you go through what looks like a very microscopic look at this department and at the dysfunction of our system.
That's one of the reasons I use the word bold.
Yeah.
Because I think it is, most departments don't want to do that.
What's important, we need to do this. This is, we're a relatively new department within the city. We were a division, previously, and it's important that we go out and we really identify what our true costs are. I don't think that's been done in the past, and I think that's why at times it's difficult to know what you need to price your product if you don't know exactly what it costs. I mean, I don't mean to oversimplify it, but that's essentially what we're trying to do here, is determine what it does cost us, and then look at our current rates and see if they're sufficient.
I have one last question on the water conservation front. Go ahead. In terms of we talked about other cities, I found it kind of interesting that the higher ratepayer, or the ratepayer that is using water above and beyond what is average or normal, i.e. the assumption is they're wasting water, they're paying for water conservation efforts in other cities. They're utilizing that. Is that for literally hard costs, or is it just programmatic and educational type?
It's often a combination. We've done studies where those revenues are in fact plowed back into grassroots conservation efforts, whether it's educational material or rebates for low-flow toilets. We have designed rates where that highest per unit cost is intended to represent the marginal cost of going out and acquiring new water. Because if consumers continue to use at those high levels and we have to go out and get new water, then they should be paying that cost. So it can be a mixed bag.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to hear about it, especially you think about places like the older part of Goodyear, and not to get into a district kind of mentality, but you think of the older parts of Goodyear where we're making a significant investment right now on this specific issue to upgrade the system such as to not waste water, or to lose water, if you will. It would seem to make sense if we still saw high rate payers in there to maybe identify a problem. If it's seat washers that are failing on people's faucets, and we reinvest in terms of buying everybody seat washers and paying somebody $10 a house to go through and redo all the seat washers in the house, and those sort of minimal efforts, but it's reinvesting in the capital. The education is obviously an integral part, but the capital of the system, as opposed to the posters and bumper stickers.
No, agreed, and that's why we would like to get council's input on that. If an adjustment's made, or if we make the determination today, set aside a percentage, whether it's 1/2 of 1%, whatever the number ends up being, and then that becomes a very, very robust process and project as we grow it as a city. That 1% of that revenue may represent very, very few dollars today, but in 20 years that can represent something very large. And then you'll have infrastructure that was put in 2007 that is now 20 years old, and you can use some of that money to do those retrofits, do those repairs, those upgrades. And it's essentially self-sustaining in some respect.
Okay. Councilman.
Thank you very much. The unique part of this is there's a revenue stream. Other than that, I hope each and every one of our departments, we do a cost analysis with regard to the expense of running a department, the cost of running that department, depreciation of whatever, and costs that will be confronted with 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. So the only unique thing about this study should be the revenue stream then, is that correct? And can you be self-sustaining is really what you want to know.
Absolutely, and it's important to note that if in the assessment there are things that we do that are inefficient, I'm not sure what would be identified. Both finance and the Water Resource Department recognize that if we would be better served doing that through another mechanism, whether it's through an outside agency, a combination, we're not opposed to that. I mean, if there's something that we do on a daily basis that is cost prohibitive and can't pay for itself, why continue to do it? Why continue to if this were a business, I'm trying to look at this with a business mentality. If this were a business, we need to be as efficient as we can. And if there's something we're doing that just doesn't make any sense, then we should stop doing it.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And Larry, I have a question for you. If we looked at any other department in the city, now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now with growth, so that we're sure that growth is going to be paying for growth, can we anticipate what the cost of doing business in each and every one of our departments will be?
Most of our modeling has been revenue-based as opposed to cost-based. There has been some analysis of personnel needs that have done by the HR department, but as to the actual anticipation of all of the operating expenses, we have not taken that down at that level of detail to the department level.
It might be really interesting if it's overwhelming, a process that maybe that could be taken into consideration, but it would be interesting because you have no revenue base for some of our departments.
That's correct.
What does our police department cost us now? What is the anticipated cost of this, and will growth pay for it over the next 10, 15, 20 years? I mean, I think we have to look at this from a cost perspective more than a revenue base, because there's no revenue base.
I think the management study is going to bring some of that forth, don't you agree?
I think so.
I'm assuming that's going to bring some of that forth. I mean, I thought was the reason for the process. Stephen, is that?
Those are the kind of conversations we've been having with the consultant.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I think that this discussion is connected. The management assessment was fully intended in phase one to identify who are we,
Right.
and also what are some of the best practices that are out there in the industry,
Right.
both in the private and public sector, and how we might take advantage of using them as benchmarks for making improvement. The phase two is to take and look at, within each of the departments, what are some things that we can do to move in that direction. That's why, as Sean identified, we need to make sure that we do not duplicate efforts here. This one's drilling way down inside the cost model, which I don't think the matrix assessment is going to get quite as deep. But I think that's part of what the subcommittee should have some discussion with the consultant at Matrix in terms of how deep they are going to go so that we understand that fully before we embark on this endeavor. So if there is some possible redundancy here, maybe we can borrow from the Matrix information and plow even deeper into this process and minimize any repetitiveness there.
Good, thank you.
Can I add?
Okay.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, okay, thank you. First of all, I think it's a real logical study, and I think it's comprehensible. I think people can understand it. I think the citizens, once you finish the 3 phases, will be able to understand it, and that's most important, because if at the end of the day is we have to raise their fees, that answer will be answered. Why? They will know why. The other thing, I think it has a greater opportunity to bring more advanced technology through the years, through the process than you had before. You won't end up with all of a sudden trying to catch up. Because if you're going to have, and I'm assuming this contingency fund will be also used for that type of thing, as well as, replacement. So I think it's a very comprehensive study, and I think it will be very beneficial to the citizens, to the city.
Anything more? Just on the matrix thing, I would encourage you to share this this flow chart with the matrix folks. I know that they've been around doing interviews on a department by department basis, but from consultant to consultant or director and management back to matrix, because I would see them giving you some information that would be valuable to you in both your task 110 and task 200 kind of areas in terms of your areas, some stuff that they may have already done that may add input into your process, thus reducing your redundancy.
I'll speak to the matrix stuff too, because I think what it does in this particular case, it just kind of gives you guys a running start.
Right.
Because you already have some of that information that you've collected. And because I know when I was interviewed, of course I mentioned the water department, right? But I think it will give you a running start. So that was kind of understood.
That was our intent, was to use their information.
Good, good. Thank you. Anything else, Council?
If I could just one thing.
Yeah.
When this item does come before council in the future, we will ask for authorization for the full 3 phases, and then we would issue a separate task order for phase 3 if needed. But it would just speed up the process, bring it before council one more time for authorization. So that's what our intent would be.
So the through 2 phases of this, the analysis and going through the technical side of it, plus the education of the public, bring those 2 together, and because you have income to support this, and then you have costs. We've always had to pay a lot of the costs out of budget. We're trying to make this self-supporting.
Yes.
So at this point, it's a situation where I think on the education side of it, people understand that rate changes are just a necessity. They see it in other cities, and I've talked to many of our citizens, and their understanding is that, hey, it's going to happen, but they have no idea what goes on behind the scenes, the processes and the education. But they're ready to listen to the fact that we have to raise rates. Now, that's not the way we want to go about it. And by you doing what you're doing, and then finally at the very end, if a rate increase is necessary, we do it, but you have an analysis and you have all kinds of background to support it. And that's part of that education that will help bring our community with you so that they will understand all these things about water conservation and all the things that go into what makes this work financially. And I thank you very much.
Thank you.
All of you for, Rick and Dennis and all of you for coming out tonight. Appreciate that.
Vice Mayor. Sorry, it's always the last comment that triggers a thought. And Sean just made a last comment about you'll come back and ask us for permission or for approval to go through this process with task orders if needed.
Right.
But I would assume in the COAC, I've asked questions before and then realized that there was a misunderstanding in the past, that third process with council approval to go into that rate study. I mean, there would be clearly, I mean, you've delineated that in the conversation tonight. I would ask that it be delineated in the future action of the council, that third task order would be issued upon report back and approval from the council.
Absolutely. We'll make that clear in the COAC. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Yeah, thank you very much. Next item B, is we will now receive and discuss the draft on I-10 Hassayampa Valley roadway framework study. And Mario Saldonado, Management Assistant, will be presenting. Mario, go ahead.
Good evening, Vice Mayor and Council. I'd like to introduce Bob Hazlett he's a senior engineer with the Maricopa Association of Governments. He's been serving as the project leader for this project. As you're aware, the council approved funding to participate in this study back in the fall of 2005. So Goodyear, along with Buckeye, Surprise, the county, ADOT, and the Federal Highway Administration Department are working with MAG and the consultant. And he's here tonight to present a conceptual transportation framework for the Hassayampa Valley, which is typically, or generally, the Gila River north to State Route 74, and then east-west, 303 west to 450 Fifth Avenue. So we wanted to bring it to you at this point. It's a draft, but just so that we can include your comments into the final draft that goes back to the MAG Regional Council for final approval in March. Bob?
Mario.
Mr. Vice Mayor, members of the Goodyear Council, I
I want to start off my presentation first by giving you a disclaimer. I am also a citizen of Goodyear up in Australia Mountain Ranch. So as you're listening to my comments and everything, I come to you with a regional perspective, but also, too, I am a citizen of the city and would like to at least get that on the table. So either I'm a hometown preacher now or else I've curried some favor. I don't know yet. The Hassayampa Valley Roadway Framework Study is a project that's been underway now since May of last year. And essentially what this is a look of the area, as Marwa had described, reaching from the Gila River on the south, going up to State Road 74 on the north, the 303 on the east, and then 459th Avenue, not quite the county line, but almost to La Paz County. And it is a area that we're starting to see tremendous growth, and of course, this does have an impact on Goodyear and the city thereof. I think it's important as I go through some of these points just to kind of give you an idea of the background and the purpose for the study. A big part of this is your neighbor to the west, Buckeye. Buckeye, right now, as far as I know, has entitled close to 310,000 lots. And if we take a conservative figure of about 3 per lot, we get a population of almost 1 million people. In addition to that, our other neighbor way to the north, Surprise, is also growing at a considerable rate too. They could easily have a population of 500,000. But I know that our city's not going to be any slouch either. We'll also be fairly large too. And so when we put all this together and we look at all the things that are going on, and yes, we have the Regional Transportation Plan that was approved by the voters back in 2004 for the Halston sales tax extension. We look at all of that, and MAG kind of said, well, maybe we can go back to our offices and pull up the drawbridge and say, hey, we're done. Everything's going to be fine in 20 years. Then we come to find out that, well, there's even more growth that's being programmed, and so that's how this study came about, and that's some of the background behind it. What really brought this out, more than anything else, is the second bullet you see on the slide, the future I-10 interchanges that have been identified. Right now, the Hassayampa Valley has over 100 master plan communities that have been entitled. With that have come about 100 requests for traffic interchanges along I-10. As a result of that, the Federal Highway Administration and the Arizona Department of Transportation came to MAG and said, what is the plan for this area? What is going to happen? And as we started digging into it ourselves, we started to realize that, well, we got a lot of master plan communities. In some places, we have arterial roadways that are feeding collector roadways, and on the other side, it's an expressway. I mean, it just seemed there was, I don't want to say chaos, but there was definitely a lot of stuff that was happening out there. And not to mention, too, again, both ADOT and the FHWA was receiving a lot of pressure to approve more traffic interchanges along I-10. And it was very clear to us that that was an approach, at least from MAG's perspective, that MAG really didn't want to see happen. We have mile spacing on most of our traffic interchanges here in what is called the Central, West, and East Valleys today. We call this the Hassayampa Valley. This is a whole new valley, so to speak. And the thing to look at is that we have that mile spacing, but it's not working to our favor in a lot of places. It doesn't allow us to have double-lane entrance ramps, and it doesn't allow us the ability to be able to allow traffic to merge in safely and efficiently. And so we're at a point right now where we're looking at the Metropolitan Freeway network, and we're looking at these new areas, the Hassayampa Valley, and then I'll talk a little bit about the Hidden Valley to the south. And we're looking at them and we're saying, well, we're putting in these new freeways. Let's do this and go back to the way freeways are supposed to be, handling the long-haul trips. And let's start to take advantage more of our arterial and our boulevard or arterial network that will help us with traffic. So again, the interchange locations kind of sparked this, and at the same time too, we looked at all of the different things that were going on in the Hassayampa Valley. And at the same time, too, the whole notion of funding kind of came up because as we started to take a look at the needs for transportation out there, we all started saying and scratching our noggins and trying to say, well, how are we going to pay for this all? And so as part of this study, we've charged the consultant to spend the majority of his time given us an idea as to how we can pay for some of this, because we're going to, as I start to show you here, we're going to be talking about some pretty dramatic improvements to the Hassayampa Valley. And again, right now, the way the sales tax is worked out and most of our federal dollar commitments for the MAG region, most of those have all been committed now through 2025. And so they certainly can be changed, obviously, but at the same time, they've been committed out for a long time. So we need to start looking at other ways to start paying for these things. And last but certainly not least, alternative modes, I think, is something that we have to kind of look at. Again, this is the study area, 303 on the east, the Gila on the south, the 459th Avenue on the west. Just so you know, for purposes, the county line is actually 579th Avenue, so it's still about another 10 miles past this. But this is a study area of roughly 1,500 square miles. If you took the central, west, and east valleys as they stand today, that's 2,000 square miles. So we're looking at roughly a planning area of about 3/4 the size of the existing Phoenix metropolitan area that stands today. Some of the major features that I'm certain you're familiar with, and you're probably seeing it right there, is the White Tank Mountains. That is one of our biggest natural features that we're trying to deal with, trying to figure out how to get a lot of traffic around that. Well, as Mario noted, there are a number of sponsors of the study. MAG is leading the project, but the City of Goodyear has been a participatory agency in this from day one, and we've been very appreciative of all that support. City of Surprise, Town of Buckeye, Arizona Department of Transportation, and the Maricopa County Department of Transportation have all contributed to the study as well. So it is a very, I want to say, balanced in some respects, because we have regional interests, we have the state interest, we have the county interest, and then we have the city interests that are all taking a look at this transportation situation and coming up with ideas. The project's being guided by a study review team that consists of the funding partners, as you talked about, but also, too, a number of other agencies. And this is just a partial list. Right now, I think our study review team's up to about 35 members. But one of the things that's been kind of interesting is that we have included folks like from Luke Air Force Base to comment on this. The Luke Auxiliary Field up in Surprise is certainly an area of interest. What their plans are with it, where they're going with it, and stuff like that is something that's really of interest to us. And we want to make certain that they have a seat at the table and help share their plans with us. Certainly, the U.S. Bureau of Land Management, there's a lot of BLM land that's out there. And, of course, Arizona state lands are out there as well. We want to make certain we get their concerns in our planning process as well. But I would have to say our largest stakeholder and who we've been working with mainly, because the area, I don't want to say it's vacant now, not by any means. I mean, you got the town of Buckeye is out there, but the majority of the Hassayampa Valley is relatively rural and lowly populated. And so what we've been finding on this particular project, that our key stakeholders have been the development community. We've been working with, I think we've had over 80 stakeholder meetings now with all the different developers, trying to work with them because they are learning the lesson of Anthem in a lot of respects, that if you don't have access to your property, and if you don't participate in getting access to your property, then your property is going to suffer. And so I think the lesson of Anthem is starting to come through loud and clear to a lot of members of the development community. I say that to a lot of people, and they're shaking their heads at me saying, oh no, what turnip truck did you just fall off of? I said, no, it has been that way. It's been really remarkable because we've identified new freeway corridors, new parkway corridors, and I'll describe those here in a little bit, and we've been getting a lot of buy-off from them to go towards the conceptual framework that I'm going to present this evening. And they're working that into their whole planning process right now. Well, the consultant team that's been helping us with it is led by Jim Harris, and they've been getting some help from Wilson and Company, Partners for Strategic Action, and Curtis Lewick and Associates out of Tucson. All of them have different niche specialties that have been knitted together on this team that has really helped us out and gotten us to where we are. We're very amazed at how fast the project has come together and how fast the concepts have come together. But at the same time, I think we've also realized, too, that there is a considerable need. And as they say, time is money, and so we're doing our best to try and work through a lot of the ideas here that we have for the framework. Just to kind of give you a brief background of how we're putting the project together, we're working through kind of a funnel approach. We looked at what we call the universe of planning concepts for the area, and we've done a screening on that, a fatal flaw analysis. We've also are now working through our second and third tier of screenings right now to get to what we call a recommended scenario. what is interesting about this whole approach too is that we've also have engaged a lot of the environmental community as well, and have put together what we call, internally we call it an environmental atlas, but it's more of an environmental scan document that helps ADOT, FHWA, MCDOT, and even cities like yourselves be able to go back to this document and use it as a first stepping stone for getting most of your environmental clearances on some of these projects. Instead of us just saying, here's a line, here it is on the map, we've actually taken a look at the environment, figured out how that works. And so from a context-sensitive design standpoint, we feel very, very proud of that. And I'm finding out now that we're meeting, because this project started really before some of the enabling legislation came through for Safety Lou, which is the current highway bill. We were meeting it before the bill even came out. So I don't know how we did that, but we're pretty excited about it. The work program, as you can see, we are right now kind of in the middle part right over here. Let me see if I can get the cursor to work here a little bit. I should have a laser pointer. There we go. We're roughly in that section right there. I'm sorry that my clumsiness at AV equipment is getting in the way here. We are right now at the point, like I said, of coalescing all the information that we have. We've gone through several screens right now, and right now we've also are getting to the point of where we're really testing the network and making certain that it will meet the needs for the community. We've had a number of different forums in addition to the stakeholder meetings. We've had some development forums where the public has been invited, but then also to a lot of the people that have been participating have been the developers themselves. And we've had a couple of these forums where we've asked them to come together and give us some ideas and some thoughts about different things. And as always in the public arena, we have some common themes, but then we have some divergent opinions. Just some of the things that I'm not going to go through every one of those. It's quite small. My eyes can't even say it, but at the same time, there's a couple of key important ones that I want to relay to you and leave with you as a message. One of the things that a lot of people have told us is not to leave toll roads out of the discussion. As we start to look at growth paying for growth, one of the suggestions that's been coming back has been to not dismiss those entirely. Take a look at them, see what they can do to maybe help us get some of these facilities maybe ahead of time. There's some places in the country right now where we're starting to see toll road facilities that are just lines on a map, but being built within 5 to 6 years, just simply because they have the ability to do it and the enabling legislation's in place. And so they've asked us not to take that off of the table. Another important thing is also to consider, I hate to say this, a tunnel through the White Tank Mountains. We have, and you're going to see here, a lot of development that's being programmed, and so they suggested to us, take a look at it. I mean, the chance of it being constructed, obviously, is, I'm not going to say it's remote, but it's not impossible. Given any money, you can do just about anything, but the bottom line of it is they said, take a look at it. Just make certain we don't dismiss it. So we went ahead and did that. Well, we received all that information, and in July we convened the development forum again, and we pulled together a number of other bulbs, as you see, and put together what we called a study area opportunities and constraints map to help us figure out where and how we should start planning for this area. And as you see on this map, it looks to a lot of people it looks very congested, but to a lot of us there's not enough information on it. But the point is what we did here is we went ahead and mapped out different things that would help us figure out what the framework should be. You can see on there things like the topography. I mean, you can see the White Tank Mountains right there, all the gray area that's right there, kind of towards the right-hand side of the map. But then also, too, you see all these giant stars that are all over the place, and those stars are different intensities of employment locations that have been proposed by the development community, and we kind of term those as activity centers, trying to figure out, how we might be able to connect the dots. You can also see, too, up in the northern parts of a fair number of magenta lines. That's the parkway system that the City of Surprise is proposing. And the parkways kind of figure prominently into this. And I'll explain to you, as I had stated earlier, I'll get to that here shortly.
Can you go back to that again? What did you say? What lines were?
The pink lines, magenta lines, that are towards the top of your map right there. Note to self: bring a laser pointer up towards the top right. Yeah. Those are their parkways, and essentially that figured prominently into our planning too, because a parkway. When a lot of people think about Parkway, and out here in Goodyear, they think about Australia Parkway, and I drive it every day. So what we're talking about is something different than Australia Parkway. If any of you are from the state of Michigan, what we're talking about is building a high-capacity arterial that prohibits lefts at intersections, but allows us to maximize the signal timing so we can get people from one end of the street to the other end of the street in as quickly and efficiently a manner as possible. Now, a lot of folks look at that and say, well, that compromises your property access. In some respects it does, in some respects it doesn't. You're going to get very high traffic volumes as a result of this. In fact, studies in Michigan have shown that these types of roadways carry about 30% greater traffic numbers than what we can on our existing arterial network. For an example, right now our highest volume arterial that we have in the valley is Bell Road over the Iowa Freeway at about 65,000 cars a day. Some of these boulevards in Michigan are carrying upwards to 80, 90,000 cars a day. And they're doing it, those are freeway numbers. I mean, some of those are the volumes we see right now on the Iowa Freeway right now. But the point is that they're doing that at grade level roadways. They have signals on them, but they have them timed in such a way that if you try to go any faster, you're going to get stopped by a signal. If you go too slow, you get stopped by a signal. It's a great traffic control thing. And but they work very well, and you can literally set your cruise control on some of these. But anyway, we were looking at those types of facilities and adding those to the area, as well as other freeways and major arterials. Well, this is what we had to go by in terms of trying to figure out where we were going. A lot of times when you do transportation plans, you always typically look about 20 years in the future because that's what our infrastructure is working on, or working towards. I mean, you just heard the report on water pipes and everything, and yes, I'm looking forward to the rates. But the point is that we're only looking at 20-year life cycle on a lot of roadways, and that's usually what our planning does. And we always say, okay, let's wait for the next generation. Well, the problem that we have is if we do that, we may miss some opportunities here. And so what we've done is we've gone ahead and done what we call a build-out situation, where we went ahead and said, okay, all the development that's been entitled in the Hassayampa Valley, in Goodyear, in Surprise, Buckeye, Maricopa County, what kind of demand are we actually looking at? And these are the figures that we're coming up with. A population of between 2 and 3 million people, almost 1 million dwelling units. Now you translate that into trips, that's about 8 million trips a day. Now, you see there where it says estimated trip capture. This is the thing that scares us in some respects, and some of the things that we're working with our development community on, is how much traffic would stay in the Hassayampa Valley and not invade the rest of the valley. Right now, it's about a 30-70 split based on the amount of commercial development that is planned in the Hassayampa Valley. The thing about when I go with commercial development too, a lot of times we don't regard retail as a legitimate commercial development. We're looking at where job centers are, office space, those types of things, warehousing, whatever you have. We're trying to look at that and trying to figure out where that can fit into this. And the big thing that comes back to us is well, this area is geared more towards residential. And we said, well, what if we open it up? And they said, well, if we open it up, then we can start to do some of those things. Well, we went ahead and, like I said, tried to figure out where traffic is coming from and going to across the valley. What is amazing about this graphic is that you see that, a lot of traffic is just going to go right over the white tanks to the immediate existing West Valley as it exists today. But there's still a fair amount of traffic to go out to East Valley. And the East Valley makes a lot of sense because right now that's where a lot of our commercial development is programmed. For the metropolitan area. I mean, the Williams Gateway area, the Intel plant that continues to expand, Honeywell. We're not certain about Motorola these days, but the point is that there's a lot of stuff that's happening out there, and so we're going to get a lot of cross-valley commutes. The other thing that's also interesting to us, too, is that people are going to live where they want to live, and they're going to work where they want to work. We can't control that. All we can do is try to provide the opportunity, and I think that's what we're trying to do as we get towards this. Yes.
Back to that slide you were just on.
Oh.
Is that 369,000 number out to the East Valley, is that considered a one-way trip or two round trip? Are those 370,000 round trips, or are those 180,000 and change?
Mr. Vice Mayor, Council Member Antoniak, that would be two-way trips.
Round trip.
Round trip, yes.
So that's not the, okay.
No, that's
the hat. So there's 370,000.
Yeah.
Times two.
Round trip.
Right. It's round trips. 370 round trips a day. And just to kind of give you a little up front, our highest volume on the freeway network today is the I-10 between the short stack or the State Road 51 interchange and the tunnel, and that's 305,000 cars a day. So we're going to be seeing even more.
And what, between the mini stack?
Mini stack and the tunnel, 305,000.
Yeah, just between, just in that
Just in that small-
16 lane, or whatever it is now, 14
14,
lanes,
yes.
has 305, 309. I.e. the improvements were made, okay.
I have a job for a while, I
Yeah,
think.
so do I, obviously.
Well, where we went from there is we said, okay, we got all this information. What are we going to try and do here? What are we going to try and do for this? Well, there are a couple of parameters that put us into developing this conceptual framework, and I want to point your attention to the very bottom part of that slide where we talk about the spacing of the freeways, the 8 to 10 miles, and then these parkways, these higher speed. Our high-capacity arterials. And we figured that this type of spacing, this is kind of similar to what we have in the valley today in a lot of respects. And every 8 to 10 miles there'd be a freeway, every 3 to 4 miles there'd be parkways. But the problem that we have, and that what we found as we started putting the concept together, and this is the latest concept as we have as of now, is that we have a lot of topography in the way that makes it quite difficult for us to do a lot of things. I think the one thing is that when we did our build-out run, we tried to figure out how much traffic would be down south of between 10 and the Gila River, and I think the number at full build-out was something in the neighborhood of over 2 million trips a day, and that kind of said, oh my goodness, if we're only can fit 300,000 on a freeway, you start adding up the numbers. We got to start looking at a lot of different options. And the one thing that we also caution ourselves to say too is that the build-out scenario never really happens. I mean, we're always going to be in redevelopment. There's always going to be changes to land use. This is just a scenario. But at the same time, I think we'd rather be ready for, I don't want to say worst case, highest traffic potential is what we like to try to do. Try to make certain we can work for that. Well, some of the highlights of the conceptual framework that you see here, you do see the freeways, you see I-10, and we have identified interchange locations at 2-mile spacing. We've got those worked out with the development community for the most part. We got them all worked out, and we already got requests for a change already. But we have them worked out with the Federal Highway Administration and the Arizona Department of Transportation. You see the 801 freeway, the I-10 reliever. A lot of folks have cautioned me from calling it the I-10 reliever because it really doesn't relieve anything. So, but it's the 801. We have that identified in here. We also have the 303, and as you can see, we also have the 303 alignment going south of the Gila that has been recommended as part of some of the Australia Mountain Ranch master planning process. And then you also see, too, a couple of new freeways. You see this north-south freeway that we call the Hassayampa North-South Freeway. That's pretty much the center of the study area. That's kind of the spine to the whole system. And what that is again a freeway corridor that would connect up with the Wickenburg bypass, the ultimate Wickenburg bypass that's been designed, and ultimately we hope get it fed into the freeway that would go eventually tie Phoenix to Las Vegas one of these days. One of the things that we at MAG are personally concerned about is that the Hoover Dam bypass is going to open up here at the end of 2008, which is going to open up even more truck traffic coming down Highway 93. And we rely heavily on truck traffic to get our goods here. And so as a result, we've been trying to work with ADOT as well as with other parts of the state to try and figure out, can we get this made into a freeway? Well, if it came into the metropolitan area, it would probably come in the Wickenburg bypass. And then we said, well, let's take it on down south to the Hassayampa Valley. But then we also have it wrapping around down there and then heading off the map towards in the lower right-hand corner, it says to Interstate 8 or Interstate 10. We're not exactly certain where that may go, and that's the subject of the next framework study that we're doing called the Hidden Valley, and the City of Goodyear is participating in that project as well. And we're pretty excited about that because there's been a lot of discussions about there maybe being this other bypass to I-10 that might be able to stretch out here and maybe go through the Hidden Valley, through Rainbow Valley and then the Hidden Valley, and maybe wrap and meet with I-10 over in Casa Grande. But that might be a way to help with maybe another bypass, so to speak, for I-10 around Phoenix. It would also help a lot of our commerce. And at the same time, too, maybe extend it even further and go into the San Pedro Valley and take it on over to Benson and be a bypass to Tucson, because the people in Tucson are waking up and realizing that when they get done rebuilding I-10 in Tucson, that's it. It's not going to get any wider. And so a lot of people are starting to realize that they need that. So we had proposed that in there. And then you also see, too, the White Tanks Freeway, as we call it, along the north side of the White Tanks, stretching over from Grand or Highway 60 over to the Hacienda Freeway, and then also to State Road 74 has always been identified as being a potential freeway as well. It's right now for corridor preservation in the MAG Regional Transportation Plan, but we want to make certain we can work through that. And then you see the network of parkways that have been identified through there. We kind of figure if we weren't able to build these parkways, we'd probably have to put in at least another 3 or 4 freeways. And freeways are more expensive than the parkways. The parkways are about a third the cost. And so we're like, let's really take maybe a close attention to these. And what is also unique about them, too, is that they are very wide, 200 feet of right-of-way, but they also have a 60-foot median down the middle of them that allow people to be able to make U-turns back. And it's amazing what kind of landscaping you can put along those types of facilities. Some of them that are operational in Michigan have got some pretty good artwork in the medians. Well, at the same time, too, we have not left out any thoughts on alternative modes. We have to, as the Phoenix area matures, I mean, we're going to be, everything is telling us we're supposed to be at 8 million by 2030, which is the size of Chicago today. Chicago has a very good commuter rail network, and MAG is undertaking a study right now to start taking a look at commuter rail. One of the things that we've been looking at is it's been a corridor that would be into the West Valley, maybe along I-10, maybe along the UP line. The railroads don't really like to have passenger traffic mix up with their freight traffic, so we're going to have to kind of figure out what makes the most sense. But we're making the assumption that that would be a likely scenario. And then there would be some type of high-capacity shuttle transit that might be able to go off of these lines. The other thing you see is over there along that Hacienda Freeway, we're trying to make that freeway corridor at least 400 feet to allow for, if not commuter rail, a freight rail corridor that would connect with the Burlington Northern Line that you see kind of angling in there in the northern part of the study area down to the UP line. The UP line they've been given permission to reactivate that line. I never thought we'd see the day that railroads are more profitable than airlines, but that's what's happening now because they're moving a lot of freight. And so we have that happening. But the thing is they use each other's tracks, but there's no way to get between those two tracks unless you go all the way downtown to the Capitol and come back out. And so one of the things that we thought about was maybe we could put a freight rail line in between the two lines over there in the Hacienda Valley. And by doing that, that would help the development opportunities out there, help maybe improve that jobs housing balance that I'd shown you earlier so that we can have more jobs and stuff in the Hacienda Valley so that people have more of an incentive to stay there and work there. And so we're working with that. We proposed that to the Douglas Ranch developer, and he said, "How do I buy rail?" So I mean, that told me that he was interested in it. So we're very excited about that. Well, let me wrap up here with a couple of remaining slides here, just to point out I've taken a lot of your time. But I just want to point out on the preliminary network assessment, we did a comparison here of how well does this concept stack up to the rest of Phoenix. As you can see. What we did is we equated everything down to what we call lane miles per 1,000 people, or persons, excuse me. And the freeways in the Hacienda Valley are at a 0.75. That's at a build-out. As you can see, present-day Phoenix, but this was before the opening of the Santan Freeway, the extension of Highway 51, as well as the completion of the 101, was at 0.46. If you put all those figures in today, the Hacienda Valley and what we have in the Phoenix Valley are starting to match up. And as you can see, too, the parkways and major arterials are almost dead on. So we feel very good about that. We also compare it to other communities throughout the United States, and we compare favorably to Dallas and Houston. Atlanta has more freeways than arterials, and I can attest to that. I was a former resident of Atlanta, emphasis on the word former. And but the thing is that they haven't been able to build up an arterial network, so they put everything in their freeways, and they have now some of the worst traffic congestion known to man. Likewise, though, you look at the Chicago area, and Chicago has a lot less. They have more people, but they have a lot less lane miles per 1,000 people, and the primary reason for that is they have a very large public transportation network. They have the commuter rail. They have down in the city, they have the heavy rail, the L. There's a lot of other transit that works out for that area, and so what it points to is that we can't just plan for roadways and freeways. We need to look at all possible things. Well, again, for implementation, and these are just some preliminary stuff that we've kind of identified along the way, and the biggest thing that we've figured out is that one thing is not going to cure all. There's not going to be a magic bullet. It's going to have to be a composite of things. One of the things that we're really concerned about is the gas tax. I'm certain a lot of you have heard that, but our gas tax has been in place since 1991. But it's a sinking fund. I mean, it was 18 cents back in 1991. As our vehicle fleet economy improves, it means people are using really technically less gas, even though we have more people driving. But in the end, it starts to degrade. And then inflation itself just takes it away. That really the gas tax today is maybe worth a dime. Some people have told me that I'm being very generous. And so, as you can tell, we really are in need of more revenue sources and taking a look at different things. But we are also in a position, the legislature has said that they really want to see no taxes. The governor has also said the same thing to us as well. Yes, plan for all this, but figure out how to do it without raising taxes. And we're kind of like, oh, it's going to be an interesting proposition for us. Just to give you an idea again of the public outreach, we have had the development forums. Our next development forum is on the 26th of February. We were very thankful that Mayor Kavanaugh came to the last development forum, and I think he said he has it on his calendar, but it's the 26th of February at 1:30 p.m. at Australia Community College. We also have all this information you see here is on the MAG website. But we have been doing our best to reach out to as many people as we possibly can to try and get as much information possible, as well as to get as much input as possible from different folks. We've also, as I stated, we worked extensively with both ADOT and the Federal Highway Administration to make certain that they are brought along. Maricopa County Department of Transportation as well. We've been working with them to make certain that they're involved as well too. So it's kind of an interesting balancing act. Just to wrap up, as Mario stated, the project itself is going to be technically done in March. We were going to try and get it through the MAG approval process at that time, but that is also the same time that we have our regional transportation plan, the annual update for that, and our conformity. And we have to have that. It's like we have to clear our calendars for March, April, and May. And so the earliest that we can get it to our council is probably going to be July. And we're going to be looking for them to accept the study, but then also to recommend to the cities the adoption of different of these new cross sections to look at making a lot of these corridors of the future, so that ultimately a lot of these can be brought into the regional transportation plan. And so with that is all the information I'm going to present this evening. I would be remiss if I didn't say that the information that Mayor Kavanaugh has been able to provide, some of his leadership, as well as City Manager Cleveland, he's been an absolutely wonderful help to us. And then on your staff, Mario, I haven't been able to do anything without him. Cato's been a great help, and so has Luke Albert. They've all been absolutely wonderful in helping us get the study to where it is right now. It's been an exciting project so far, and we're really anxious to maybe see some things start getting implemented. And I'll be happy to take any questions, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, do anybody have any? Yeah, okay.
Before you go on,
Fred, go ahead.
when you talk about making more revenue available without increasing taxes, you're talking about toll roads. And you mentioned that early on, the use of toll roads. Do we have any specific ideas about toll roads, or is this just something that was thrown out?
Mr. Vice Mayor, Council Member Scott, we're starting to dig into that right now. Right now, what we found more than anything else is that Arizona legislation on tolling facilities is very limiting in terms of what we can and can't do. In fact, if you look at the legislation, it says something about that it would be a plank road that's 50 feet wide. So it dates back to statehood days. So there have been a lot of folks that have been looking at it carefully and trying to figure out how we can possibly modernize it and maybe invite what we call a public-private partnerships to be able to operate these things. There's a lot of examples of those happening now across the United States. And in fact, in Texas, they were able to do a public-private partnership for a bypass around Austin, and it was just a line on a map, like these were lines on a map that I just showed you here. And the first 20 miles of it was just opened in 5 years because of being able to use the private sector and their allocating or how they're able to procure things.
You already mentioned if we're going to have toll roads, we're looking at that. This is a project that's going to take years because the legislature's going to have to get off their duff and do something about it. Can't do it with existing laws, but so that's a direction we might want to move. You talked about parkways also. There's a good use of toll roads, parkways. Other states have been very successful with it. They created parkway toll roads 50 years ago with the idea that they would be only toll roads only until they pay for themselves, and they're still toll roads, but nonetheless they're working. They're moving traffic. So that's something to look at. I don't know how much attention, you kind of passed over this in a hurry. I don't know how much attention you've really given to this.
Councilmember Scott, yes, I agree with what you're saying, and thank you for the comments. We are definitely making certain that all avenues are explored, including that. Kentucky has a vast parkway system, and in fact, Kentucky just recently took all the tolls off of their parkways. They were able to pay them all off. It took them 30 years to do it, but they were able to do it, and so it's pretty exciting that they were able to do that. But you have to balance that against operations and maintenance costs and all that type of stuff, too. And so that's why you still see tolls around Chicago and Indiana and stuff like that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for all the information. You certainly have already gathered a lot, and we can see all the thought processes going behind this. I, too, am a victim, or whatever you want to call it, toll roads, depending on your hometown and where you're from. And we're still paying roads that were built back in 1960, and you wonder about that. But then again, the towns need the revenue, and they need to make sure that they continue to operate efficiently. Is the plan to bring more information back to us as it, like every 6 weeks or 6 months? And Mario, this might be between you and Bob, but I mean, I'd like to stay up with this instead of just getting one big dump at the 6, 8, 10 months. It's almost too much to comprehend. So I was wondering if you planned on an informal schedule to us.
You know, there are formal public hearings, as Bob talked about, planned beginning today through August. And, you know, as the project moves along, stakeholders get involved and provide input. I'd be more than happy to forward that information to the City Council just to keep you in the loop. You're more than welcome to attend any of the public workshops. I can certainly put this item back on the agenda in 2 months just to touch base.
I think that's a good idea, and I like the idea of sending, that way we get to kind of read it at our leisure, but we know what's going on so we can ask some intelligent questions when Bob gets back in here. Okay, all right, thank you.
It's on my way home.
Oh, okay.
You send it back early. No, I know the Councilman Antoniak has quite a bit to say. Wow, you're reading my mind. So go ahead. Bob, on the tunnel assumption, if you drop that, I mean, arguably, I got to think that that's pie in the sky. I mean, you're going through solid rock, I'm sure. But if you drop that, what does that do? I assume you're making the assumption that if the option is in there, you've got to have what the impact is or why there's a fatal flaw such that you're considering that an option.
Mr. Vice Mayor, Councilmember Antoniak, you're absolutely correct. I think the thing that we have to look at is that we're trying to encompass all possible alternatives, and if we didn't look at that, I don't think we would have a fairly responsible study. Granted, building a tunnel is a very expensive proposition. I mean, the longest tunnel that I'm aware of that was recently constructed, and this was back in the 60s, is the I-70 tunnel underneath the Continental Divide in Colorado. And that's the kind of tunnel that we would probably be looking at. But that is, I mean, if it had to be built in today's standards, it would cost an extraordinary amount of money. However, I think if we didn't at least look at it, just from the standpoint of saying that we did look at it, we did, you know, and this is the reasons it was dismissed, I think it shows to everyone that it was a responsible way of looking at what we're trying to do.
And then, you know, one of the things, I guess, in terms of if this is a hearing or just a work session, you're looking for feedback from us is
more feedback.
Yeah, the things that we've done, and I can't put my finger on it specifically, but things that we've learned in the other parts of the valley in terms of integrating the existing environment, i.e. the White Tank Mountains on up through Hummingbird Springs Wilderness, you know, just kind of good land stewardship things. Are you even having a discussion about design features that will exist on some of these major thoroughfares? Because they really do, I mean, We essentially go through and we carve up the land and we put in very artificial barriers such that it doesn't respect the existing environment as much as you can, given the densities that are going to occur out there. Is that discussion being had?
Councilmember Antoniak, yes, it is, and the word there is emphatically yes. As I had stated earlier, if we weren't able to build some of these parkways at the 200-foot right-of-way level with the high capacity and the type of signalization we're talking about, we probably have to build more freeways close to the White Tank Mountain to be able to accommodate the demand. Just by having those two parkways right there, one's called Turner, which is fairly close to the White Tank Mountains, and the other one is Sun Valley Parkways, but modified from what it is today. But just having those there can take care of one freeway's worth of traffic and then some. But it still provide a lot of access to adjacent property, still be able to move traffic at a fairly good clip, about 50 miles an hour, still be able to do a lot of that. And so that's why we're very excited about introducing that concept to this area and encouraging those as more contact sensitive, as we call them, sensitive to the environment, not barriers, not great walls, but places that, people want to drive down them versus, places that are just, you put a road down.
I certainly hope we see the expansion of the railroad transit. I mean, people fight it, and I don't understand, why. You live in Europe and you want to go someplace, and then you drive your car onto the train, and so you have transportation on the other side. I mean, we have to think about those things now, and we have to think about the people going to work from out here into the city. There's just no other choice, and I see a lot of resistance on this side of the country, and I don't quite understand why.
Mr. Vice Mayor, Councilmember Lord, your perception is, from our perception, is fairly accurate. But at the same time, Phoenix is a unique area. Most larger cities, large metropolitan areas, have fairly extensive networks of railroads. We do not. We live on a railroad cul-de-sac for all practical purposes. And so as a result now, we're going to have to try and figure out how to put in some type of a higher capacity transit system that is sensitive to the neighborhoods, sensitive to the environment, and sensitive to our costs, our wallets. And it's not it's not going to be an easy prospect because again, in the Chicago area, the primary reason they have it is they were the hub for all the railroads, and so they use those rail lines right now. We simply just don't have those here. We do have a good network of canals and drainage ditches that we might be able to work with, but I don't know. That's pie in the sky.
It's interesting to see, the cost difference between laying a highway and laying rails.
Oh, it is remarkable. It is remarkable. Some of the commuter rail lines they could be got or had for about as much as putting in a freeway, if not even cheaper. But then you have the operations and maintenance costs that you have to worry about.
It just seems so easy. I lived in the D.C., Virginia area,
Metro system,
and Metro, and when it first came in, I was there in Metro, people were screaming, "I'm never going to take it. I'm not going to pay for that." And now people wait to get on. Sometimes they can't get on it.
Before I became a citizen of Goodyear, I can't say resident, I am a citizen, I vote. But before I became a citizen of Goodyear, I lived in the Denver area, and Denver had the exact same thing when light rail came into Denver. People fought that tooth and nail. And now, since the first large line opened, the Southwest line as they call it, now they have the Southeast line, the T-Rex line, but since that opened, it was like everyone's saying, when am I getting my line now?
No, and it's emergency. When you think of emergency situations, I think about when the Pentagon, the plane went in the Pentagon. I mean, that was mass transit, get people out of that city.
Absolutely.
And we don't have that type of emergency evacuation.
And they saved $300 or $400 million, if I'm not mistaken, on building that in conjunction with their Department of Transportation. One of the lines, the one that's in the center of the freeway.
You mean the T-Rex? Yeah, T-Rex line. It's actually on the side of the freeway, but you're right.
Yeah.
That when the T-Rex line was constructed to the Colorado, it cost $1.7 billion, and about $800 million of it was for the rail line that went along the side.
Right, but had they done one project and then come back and done the second one,
it would have been far more expensive.
Well, $300 or $400 million.
Yeah, and it also was really terrific because they didn't have to take a lot of right of way because they were able to use the existing CDOT right of way to build the roadway. So, and we have our median of I-10 is really technically reserved for a rail line. between the 101 and 17.
Now, I have a question on CanMax, and that thing scares me. What I've heard, and these are just hearsay, but that thing is coming down, and if it does take the 303 path or any of these highways down through here, my understanding that the amount of traffic that will be on that CanMax within the next 5 to 10 years is going to be unbelievable, especially with the bridge being built across the Colorado up north.
Mr. Vice Mayor, you are correct about the bridge opening and the amount of commercial truck traffic that we expect to see the increase. How it enters into the Phoenix area and everything, we have a designated corridor right now, albeit it's a little bit temporary. We're trying to get our arms around that as fast as we can, and I think the Hassayampa North-South Freeway that I've shown is probably going to be probably end up being the CanMax route down to at least down to State Road 85 and then down to I-8. The point about that, though, is that it's right now we're still speculating right now as to really how much truck traffic we're going to have. Right now, MAG is working with the other COGS, Council of Governments, and NPOs in the state on a statewide mobility reconnaissance study. It's in fact the RFP is on the street right now, and MAG's hopefully going to get that underway here in April, and we're going to try and get a more serious look at that, because one of the things that we're going to put together is what we call a statewide transportation planning tool that allows us to be able to try and finally, once and for all, answer a lot of these questions about CanMax, because I think a lot of times we've been looking at it in the past, and we haven't really had this tool to be able to help us figure that out, and that was something that MAG recognized the state needed, and so that's why we're spearheading that effort to try and get that underway.
Yeah, I have a question. Do you look at it in air quality, in conjunction with air quality? I'm looking at these highways, and I'm thinking of the heat that comes up from them. I mean, that is...
Councilmember Lord, you're absolutely right. We do our best to look at air quality as much as we can. Right now, this is the conceptual stage, and all we can do now is try to avoid. But the one thing that I can report back to you on is that as far as air quality is in the valley, some folks may not believe it, but it is getting a lot better. Our tailpipe emissions, especially from vehicles and stuff like that, are starting to dwindle down. Especially now we have tougher emission standards on diesel engines now, and that's going to take them down even further. I'm not going to say they're going to be down to zero by a certain date, but they're going to be far less later in the future, just as today here in 2007 versus what they were back in 97, we're at a lesser rate. However, with that said, we still have the issue of dust, but we live in a desert. And so it's very tough to figure out how to work that. And so MAG obviously has been working with our partners at ADOT as well as with the Federal Highway Administration to try and figure out how to work with that. And thanks for your comments.
Any other?
I heard on the radio somebody's misfortune might be a reprieve for your planning purposes. They're not going to open the bridge till 2010 due to the cranes falling down in the snowstorm. So
Well, let's see, Hope Springs. Oh, no. Darn.
that was just announced yesterday, by the way.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, we just heard that too, in fact.
Anything else? Well, thank you, Bob.
Thank you very much.
Okay, information. Council members report on current events. Are there any events that council members would like to present to at this time? Okay.
Not current. Not something I attended, but something that Stephen and Mario may want to pay attention to. We were just talking public-private partnerships, and I think TIP Training is introducing something that has to do with public-private partnerships, or at least that's word on the street. So you might take that. Right. Oh, okay. They are interrelated.
Okay, anything else?
I guess I have something to report. This past Saturday, I got an opportunity to participate in the Lockheed Martin Math Counts competition that went on, and I have to tell you, that was really very interesting. They must have had about 70 excited students. It's been a long time for some of you guys to have been around that, but it was a lot of fun, and it was very competitive, and it was very organized. And I got an opportunity to speak, and I spoke about education, and I was able to talk about our universities and what we're trying to do here. So it's really fun for me. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, I'd just like to give an attaboy to the community services. We went to Legislative Day, And I hadn't been to one. I'd missed it each time, so I went down there, and it was really good. We talked to our senators and representatives, and it was nice to be among the regular citizens of Goodyear, and so it was very good.
Okay. Manager.
Yes,
Now, do you have any current events and reports?
yes, sir. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we always enjoy the support of the city council and the continuing endeavors to build on our city culture. And I'd like to take a moment, if I may. I have two new employees with us that are really out in the forefront to further employee safety and employee development, two of the major initiatives that you've asked that staff undertake. And so if I might, they would like to take a moment to give you a brief introduction of themselves to you. The first I'd like to introduce is Jesse Cisneros, who comes to us from Pulte Homes. He is the safety compliance specialist. Jesse?
Thank you, Stephen. Good evening, Vice Mayor Cavalier, council members. As Stephen said, my name is Jesse Cisneros. I've been doing safety and risk management for the last 10 years. I work for one company, Pulte Homes. I believe in the power of culture. That was one word that he used to introduce me. I believe that culture is powerful as it influences our behavior. I believe, in fact, if you read one of Webster's definitions for the word culture, it's the invisible force that shapes or influences our behavior. Prior to coming to the city of Goodyear, I did a lot of research because this was going to be my future work home. And the culture that I found in the research within this organization and the safety and the workplace culture, I found to be very strong. I'm a firm believer in culture. I'm a firm believer that as I teach behavior-based safety, I focused on that element so as to ultimately achieve my objective, which is to ensure that our employees are going home every night the way they showed up to work, which is safe and intact and happy. So I'm very excited to be here. I'm happy to be here. And I look forward to enjoying a long career with this city. So thank you.
Welcome.
The second employee that I have a pleasure to introduce tonight is Sandra Healy. Sandra is our employee development specialist. She has a background from City of Phoenix and a number of public and private areas, and especially even as a state training officer. So, Sandra?
Forgive me, this is my first audience in front of City Council, and I was a little nervous, so I asked Dean Kokenauer how I should address you, and he told me exactly what to say. So, Honorable Vice Mayor and illustrious and sparkling City Council members, thank you for receiving me. As our City Manager told you, I did most recently come from City of Phoenix. I was there for a year in the Parks and Recreation Department. Before that, I was at the Arizona Supreme Court, training the probation staff there, and before that at Maricopa Superior Court. So I've been training for probably about 9 years now, and this is absolutely the best place I have ever worked, and I am just honored to be included in your team. Thank you very much.
We'll all swing back. And yeah, with that remark, I don't know, I've never been called anything so nice. So, with that, we'll adjourn.